All right. This is Jamil Madden with Fall In. Welcome to our hackathon podcast, where we're talking with the first place winners of the August 5th through 7th hackathon, where our keynote was Dr. Barbara Oakley, author of Learning How to Learn. And so, yeah, we're speaking with Team HasDid, first place. Vital, you were the team leader. Why don't you talk a little bit about yourself, a brief introduction, and a little bit about the contributions about your hackathon project?
Sure. So, hello, I'm Vital, UX designer. Um, I'm an Army veteran. You know, put together this team for this hackathon with these two gentlemen here, and yeah. So the idea is that I'm UX designer, so I'm here to help kind of map out the project, answer some questions, put myself in the shoes of who this is for, and try to figure out what questions they would ask, and then hopefully put that together in something that these guys can build here, right? So, yeah, I think that's the short intro.
Yeah, could you dive real quick into what HasDid is and how you guys came up with the project?
Yeah. So HasDid is a tool that's kind of making use of this new decentralized identifier recommendation. So it's the W3C's one of this newest recommendation to kind of expand on this decentralized tech. It's kind of make it into the mainstream. And so, Com and I had been talking about this type of stuff for a while, and we kind of ran into Alex, who was working on a project that's very related. And so, yeah, that's kind of how we got this thing started. Um,
Very cool. Comb, yeah, if you want to go next and tell us a little bit about your background and your contributions towards the project.
Sure. So, hi, I'm Comb. My background is I was a bartender until 2 years ago, and pandemic hit, and actually Vital was always badgering me to learn how to code. It's kind of a daunting task to approach, you know, and so that's pandemic hit, and I got laid off, and I just deep dove into JavaScript and React and stuff, and forward all the way up to here, and my contribution to a project was doing the front end, kind of putting the landing page together, connecting the forms, uh, getting that data table up and running, and yeah, I think that's about it for me.
Very cool. Alex, you want to go next?
Sure, yeah. So my name is Alex. I've been in the tech for ever since high school, really, when I laid my hands on the first computer and I would ask it questions and it would tell me stuff. And I was like, wait a minute, I can have computers do whatever I want them to. This is amazing. This is magic. So I really thought I was a wizard. And I from then on, I just started doing programming. So I moved from like quality assurance to working at Rosetta Stone, and then eventually getting into mobile development, so iOS, iPad stuff. And that's been majority of my life until a couple of years ago when I started getting into blockchain tech, Web3, and really was curious why people were excited about Ethereum, why people are excited about Bitcoin, and currently Chia project, which introduced a concept that I was never really familiar with, which is decentralized IDs, and learned that decentralized IDs are probably going to change the world and how we interact with technology. I think a big part of how we show ourselves on the internet as like a little profile that will be overtaken by DIDs somehow or connected with DIDs in the blockchain. So stuff that I was contributing with is just kind of sharing how like the Chia blockchain works, kind of introducing Vital and Com to that, and then doing the setting up the backend and trying to connect like the minting process to the people signing up on the website process, and eventually getting them DADs and profiles and connecting the whole thing together. So yeah, but excited to have worked with Vital and Com. They it's amazing to watch a team work together cohesively as a unit. So definitely an awesome experience.
Very cool. Lots to unpack there. I'm curious, since this is a veterans hackathon, Vital, Purple Heart recipient, how did you transition into your field of UI UX designing? I'm curious, what's the story behind that?
Well, I took a very traditional approach, was in Army infantry, as a designer typically would. But yeah, I got seriously injured in Afghanistan, and I kind of had to reassess my career plans. This was 1 year into 5-year enlistment, and I just had to completely do a 180 and kind of pick a new path. And so I had worked, technology. Had done a little bit of, IT support, help desk, designed a few websites. And so I was like, you know what? I'd probably do some more of that. And so I attempted to kind of get some schooling, went to local community colleges, took a visual basic class. That's not very helpful. Thanks, Blue Ridge. So kept kind of not having the greatest experience at school. Was not doing so well. And I ran into an Army buddy when I was living in California, who was also, but he's about to graduate from bachelor's in computer science from UC Monterey, and he lost his eyesight from the war in Iraq, and so he was mentoring me with my Python class on his computer that doesn't have a monitor, just has a little robot that speaks really quickly to him, kind of reads in the content. And we kind of blew through half of the curriculum for that class, in an afternoon. And, this is a class that I had spent a few months not doing well, and it kind of just changed my thinking completely. Dropped out of school. That was my last attempt. Went the self-teaching route and started doing website design and marketing for small businesses. So started, with a $1,000 pizza website for a local pizza shop. Worked on several tens of thousands of dollars of monthly retainer marketing campaigns.
Wow.
And so, I've been kind of exposed to a lot of different, businesses, organizations, and their problems. I was always kind of tweaking up the designs and making changes here and there. And kind of found out I was doing UX work before I even knew what UX was. So that's kind of how I got into this stuff. And these days, I'm doing product and UX for startups. I think I've kind of found my thing. So that's been my path.
Very cool. That's very interesting, and there's so many questions that are like popping into my head when you shared that story. But I want to shift to Alex. Alex, you've been in mobile development for the past decade. I'm curious, how did you step into it, and why mobile engineering?
Yeah, so I started with doing desktop apps and I guess helping out with website stuff at first. But when Apple came out with the iPhone, I saw that there were some opportunities for testing out some new grounds that we haven't had before. So I think we, at that point, 2007, 2012 timeframe, iPhone comes out, people are kind of excited, and Steve Jobs says, "You're going to be writing web apps, and they're going to be on the phone at first." And I was like, nope, no thanks. I don't want to write websites. And but later they came out with their SDK that was a native SDK using Objective C. And at the time, I was writing stuff in ActionScript and using Adobe's frameworks. And I really didn't like some of the stuff that they did with rendering. And there were bugs, security vulnerabilities coming out weekly that people were worried about. And one of the things I knew that C offered you, and at that point, Objective C, is really more consistency and clarity in both the code you write and the output you expect to get. And so I started to see these, funny, they were like fart apps were the most popular apps in the App Store. And I was like, people are just having fun.
I downloaded those. Yeah.
Right? Oh, what about the Ruby app or whatever it was? It was a $999, and all you get was an image of the diamond or the ruby. Like,
Yeah.
It is insanity. Like, why are people doing this? But it was fun, right? And so I was like, all right, well, this sounds kind of interesting. Well, as I started to dive into it, I recognized that Apple is doing some really interesting things in terms of privacy. And one of them was you couldn't, for example, retrieve the phone number of the caller if you're an app and you don't explicitly request permissions from the user or from Apple to even retrieve the phone number. And to me, that started to kind of go down the path of, I really like that they're focusing at that time on privacy so much that I'm, as a developer, can't simply interject myself into the person's life and steal data from the person. Like, I have to ask a lot of permissions, and I have to make sure that it's for a valid reason. And there's always way around everything, but I really found that interesting. And then the other aspect, which is more exciting, is like working on such a tiny device where you can do everything you want to with your thumb, essentially, right? Like, it's really cool that I get to navigate and do everything I need for my life by doing like this tapping thing. But then I started to notice that like we had buttons. People would put buttons up here, and I'm like, my thumb doesn't go up there. What's happening here? Like, people, stop doing that. Like, stop putting buttons up there. So I'm like, I want to write some apps. I want to see how hard it is. And it's hard. It is really hard to design a good user interface. Vital knows, Com knows, like, this is incredibly hard, and it's rewarding. And that's where it comes from. Like, that reward of you figured it out. You figured out a really hard user interface that you're used to, like moving your mouse, 1,000 pixels across the screen to press a button. You have to now figure out how to do it near the thumb and intuitively enough that anybody, my mom and dad, had to know how to use this thing. And that's another huge challenge. So I think the phone opened up a lot of possibilities for a multi-generational use, and all of this came together, and I said, I want this. This is a really, really cool little thing that I want to get into. And been in it ever since. It's been super fun and rewarding. Lots to learn always. So yeah.
Very cool. I'm curious, did you have a CS background before stepping into it?
I did, yeah. So in high school, I took my first QBasic class, Vital, before I did Visual Basic stuff on my own. Hated it so much that I didn't want to ever do Visual Basic or QBasic. But because I did QBasic and a little bit of C or C++ in high school, all throughout college, I did computer science. And that transitioned into working with computers since then. So yeah, yep.
Very cool.
I like
Um,
I like
yeah.
that we keep basic as a theme that keeps coming up because actually basics what I learned on as well on my TI-83 calculator instead of paying attention in algebra. I was entering Drug Wars, Lunar Lander, Snake. Uh, oh, I had so many good games. I got my calculator confiscated towards the end, so yeah.
I remember I used to play that. That was like our Game Boy.
Yeah.
Yes. We couldn't have a Game Boy in the classroom, but you could absolutely have that calculator. Eventually, teachers did catch on to us because
If
they were
you're
like,
willing
"What are you
to
doing
spend
here?"
hours coding, entering basic code into your thing and testing, it's like you don't know if it's gonna work till the very end. Good times.
Comb, I'm curious, what resources have been helpful for you as you navigate your tech career? You mentioned you're pretty new, a couple years in. There's countless resources out there. And so, yeah, which ones have been most helpful for you?
Yeah, that's a really good question actually, because it is overwhelming when you first approach it, especially approaching it as an adult. Like it's so many things, like what language do you start with? Does it matter? What do they do? What is the back end? What is the front end? What is a database? How does it work with an app? And when you're first starting out, you really have no idea. It's all just a bunch of random names, and it is, like Python. What does that really mean? JavaScript, but some, but so there are a bunch of resources, and if you can kind of narrow it down to this to the stuff that you want, it helps a lot. And so I started with Free Code Camp, so big shout out to Free Code Camp because it's really good for dipping your toes in, and it's free. Um, Another one that I found was Open App Academy, which was also a free curriculum, and that was great too. Really difficult, but just so well thought out and thorough. And another resource that was great is join a dev Slack. Like Vital put me on to Operation Code, but I'm also part of the one in New Orleans where I live currently. And it's especially when you're not coming from the tech world and you don't have many people to reach out with that are related to what you're doing. Slack channels are great for that. There's a lot of helpful people on them. And then, for me, my approach was a little stubborn because I dropped out of high school and I did 2 years of college, and I just school isn't really for me. And I thought, well, if I'm gonna learn how to program, I'm gonna do it because I want to, not because I put a lot of money into it or because uh, I'm forced to. So there's definitely a lot of resources out there. You kind of have to do that, and at the same time experiment with just small projects and fail a lot. I think that's the main way that I got to this.
Very insightful. Yeah, I heard really good things about Open App Academy. I'm planning on checking it out as well. Have you completed like the entire curriculum for that?
No, so I completed chapters of it. I did the Ruby portion. I did the first portion is great because it's not so much the language. They just teach you the concepts, like logic. What is logic? How does it work? Things that will apply to really any language or any type of programming you'll do. So I kind of picked and choose. I also did the React section. It takes a while, so it's like The thing is, I started working pretty early on as I was learning, so it was a little bit. I just jumped into the fire and kind of studied when I could, and then worked in between. Definitely intense, but something I'd recommend. Just jump into it. But yeah, one more thing is actually Open App Academy. They just released a new curriculum also for free. It's just updated. So I'm going to check that out. I haven't yet.
I'm curious, how did you strike a balance between studying and working? Because that seems very difficult.
Well, there's different ways to learn, and my method that I prefer is top-down learning, and it's kind of like first you hit the problem, and then you seek the tools to find the solution. And because I find that if I'm just learning in general for future issues, I have a hard time paying attention or keeping interested. But when you have a problem and you've made a promise that you're going to solve it by next month, suddenly you find the motivation and energy and focus that you need to figure it out. And that's where you can, Udemy was also great for like $10 courses. Always buy on sale. That would be my advice for Udemy. But yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, Vital, I'm curious what resources have been helpful navigating your design career.
It's a difficult question because there's not a lot of. It's not like web development where you can go find resources on JavaScript or React or React Native. UX is kind of still being invented. There's like combat going on online about definition. Am I UX? Am I UI? Am I product? No, I'm product UXD. It's like, all right, y'all. I'm trying to build some stuff here. I don't care about the title, And so every place that I've ever done UX at has a completely different definition of what UX is. I've been in a job interview where things were kind of going iffy, and so I turned things around by asking the CEO what UX was. It was like 17 minutes worth of answer, and then he's like, yeah, I'm still talking. I'm going to stop talking now. When do you want to start? So it's like UX is a tough cookie, It's like nobody knows, everybody knows. Who knows? Read a lot, talk to a lot of people, talk to a lot of designers, talk to the ones that are mad. 2 books I recommend. Atomic Design. It's actually by a JMU graduate, which is Harrisonburg based, 30 minutes from me. Brad Frost. Atomic Design. Teach you a lot about what the heck is a design system, why, how. It's like, it was very instrumental for me. It took me years to even understand it all, but it's like I took a piece, played with that, and then another piece and built on top of that. And it's kind of what atomic design is about. Another one is like learning UI, refactoring UI. Another good book. I can't remember who wrote it, sorry. But it's famous enough that you just Google refactoring UI and you'll find it. And they did a really good job because it's like green check mark picture, red check mark picture, and then explanation of why it's bad and explanation of why it's good. On so many little different pieces of UI, And so that taught me quite a lot. I recommend that one a lot. And then, hackathons. I mean, this is why we're here on this podcast, right? But I've done probably 8 or 9 by now. And just just practicing design process with different developers and kind of getting their their perspective, the way they understand the problem. Working with Alex was amazing because I did not know a whole lot about Chia blockchain. There's so many of them. I just haven't looked at Chia yet. And so Alex has a really good understanding of the problem, and so was able to answer all my questions, the good, well thought out ones, the terrible stream of consciousness. I just pooped that one out. And so it was really awesome to be able to kind of just fast fire some questions until I understand what's going on, and it's like, well, now that I understand, we should frame this that way, this is the type of things need to go in FAQ, this is the type of questions that might come up. So it's like always kind of trying to figure out and adapt. Just work with a bunch of different people on smaller projects at first, and then try to do a bigger one. And like Com said, maybe try to do a hard one. Charge really cheap and be upfront about the fact that you're not an expert. And people will give you a shot sometimes. And when you're in that area where you're uncertain and it's like, oh God, what's going on? Kind of get it, I kind of don't. Like that's when you end up doing the most learning. You come back to it the next day and you're like, damn, okay, yeah. And it takes a lot of these passes to kind of finally get it. And so just a lot of exposure. Like if you're looking for that college degree to go learn UX, well, good luck. Me too. Let me know when you find that program. But yeah.
Very cool. Alex, same questions. What resources, we talked about Swift UI before the recording started, but I'm curious, what resources have been helpful for you as you navigate your career?
Yeah, I think Com and Vital already kind of summed it up really, really well in what I was thinking as well. At first, it's super important to ask as many questions as you can, because that's really the only way you understand. And fortunately enough for us in the time and age where we live, you can ask any web engine, search engine to give you 90% of the answers. So that part is amazing. So I use Google daily, and if there is a developer who's never used Google to search, they're probably lying, or they're like brilliant enough that they can retain everything in their head. I would say 95% of developers Google things every single day. So if somebody's listening to this in the future and you're like, man, I just don't know if I can answer these questions. We don't know the answers either. We Google them. Just Google them. It's fine. You're going to be okay. It's great. Like just figure it out. And really the two pieces of what Com said ties into the next part is, he was saying how you want to just throw yourself at the problem, and then not only do you know what you're solving, but you actually know what questions to ask. If you're trying to learn, it's a nebulous thing or entity you're learning about. It's hard to sometimes gain the answers that you can retain. So it's better to simply say, if I can, this is one aspect of hackathons that's really good, is if you can narrow your task to something extremely simple, you don't have to worry about everything. You just solve that one little problem. And that one little problem could have lots of questions in it that you didn't know you had at first. And so you start answering them one by one. And that's okay. Just Google every single one, or get a book, answer every single one at a time. And the last bit of it that has started to help me more recently, as I've started using resources like iOS Dev Weekly. So iOS Dev Weekly is an email list for all iOS mobile developers. And Dave Verber, I think I'm pronouncing that right, he puts together well-known developers in the community, in the Swift community, that write about mobile development, right? So that's really good because you actually get a list of people in front of you that you can follow along with and learn from them. But it also then shows people like Hacking with Swift, for example, website. Hacking with Swift is by a person who loves Swift, they develop, and then they share everything that they're learning. And I think that is the last piece of how one should learn is ask questions, narrow down your scope, answer them for yourself, and then teach. Because by teaching, you learn even better than you would have ever otherwise. So if you just a very simple blog with very simple text and images for what you're learning, try to describe it to somebody else as if you're teaching a big audience, and you'll learn that you actually may have not learned the topic as well as you could have. And once as you write about it, it retains in your mind better and you're able to teach others. And you never know who you can help in the future. I do it because I help myself because I tend to forget stuff. So as I do write blog entries, I actually am writing it for myself, for my future self. I'm not really writing it for anybody. So if somebody is like finds it useful, great. But I'm not writing it for you. I'm writing it for me. But it works out really well for, I think, for everybody. So yeah, those would be my recommendations and ways that I've learned.
Noted. Yeah, I want to shift directions to the hackathon project that you guys selected. It was blockchain related. I'm curious, how did you guys come across Chia blockchain? What was it that intrigued you guys? What essentially do you guys see as the problem that you guys were attempting to solving for?
Should I take a stab at this, guys?
Yes, please.
So a friend of mine who retired off of Bitcoin mining said I should look into Chia. Hey, that's probably not a bad place to look at. So if somebody's retiring off of blockchain tech, like I should probably look into it. That was like a year ago. So in my spare time at nights, I would just learn about what is a blockchain. I learned about like Ethereum and Bitcoin and then Chia. And so the thing that fascinates me about Chia is that Bitcoin, you could mine it using a CPU, then a GPU, then it went to ASIC mining, which is the super powerful microcomputer, very specific architecture just for doing that work. And it's like it costs these days it's like $10,000 for this like box, and it might make you some Bitcoin, might mine some Bitcoin. It uses tons of energy. Then we got to Ethereum, and they said, "Hey, we're going to use even less energy and stuff, so you can it's still proof of work. You still mine it, but it supposedly takes less energy. But because of how many people can use it, it can still be a lot." And then in a couple of years ago, Bram Cohen, the founder of Chia, and he started to work on this project and brought in some people who were wanting to solve the problem of using too much energy. And so with what Chia blockchain or Chia network, what they're trying to do is, instead of continuously using power and resource to create something, do this mathematical computation and then throw it out, instead you use a CPU one time, you do a computation, you take that computation and store it as files on hard drives. And then you leave it there forever. So you can turn off your plotter, as they call it, the thing that does the hash computation. And then you just leave your farmer on like a Raspberry Pi. And then you can have, for example, I think now you can connect like 400 terabytes on a single Raspberry Pi running the Chia farmer. And you, however long it takes for, depending on how many hard drives you've filled up, you may get a reward of 2 Chia for now, for example. So with 400 terabytes of hard drives and a Raspberry Pi, I think it's like every 2 weeks you get 2 Chia. So a Chia is like $40 or whatever. So very low power usage, and you've pre-computed a bunch of stuff. You stored it, so you're still doing proof of work, but eventually you don't have to do anything else. You just let it run, and it does the same thing. So their approach is talk to governments and big business entities to try to use Chia as a blockchain. And their current thing that they actually just announced, I think yesterday, is that they have a couple of initiatives for carbon offset via the blockchain. So Costa Rica is one of the first countries that's using Chia blockchain to do some carbon offset stuff and just like reduce our carbon footprint on Earth. And that's their kind of big goal, is to reduce carbon usage and how that stuff is recorded and documented and stuff like that. So really, really interesting stuff. There's a lot more there that I can talk about it for a long time, but so that's why the Chia blockchain starting to solve a couple of issues. Power is one of them. The other big one is it's introducing its own language for how you create smart contracts, as they call coins or coin set model. And it just by the way it works, because it uses Lisp as sort of its framework, it's inherently more secure than, for example, Solidity. And so they're introducing things that haven't been seen on any other blockchain that at least I've heard of. So that's the stuff that was like, hey, this is really cool. And then more recently, they said, hey, in order to create NFTs on the blockchain, you should also have something that ties you as an individual to provenance, or the historical record of ownership, to who created the NFT and where did it travel across the blockchain. So let's say we were doing the video during the hackathon, like let's say that the Mona Lisa was to be recorded with the author, the painter. If he was to exist today, he could say, I, Leonardo da Vinci, painted this painting. Here it is. The blockchain records that I am the owner, and the DID is essentially what proves it. And even if he sells it to somebody and sells somebody else to somebody else, you'll forever and ever, if the blockchain is alive, you get to see that Leonardo da Vinci was the one who painted the painting. So it forever proves that. So the DID thing seems really simple now because, people in JPEGs are weird, right? Like people are spending hundreds of thousands on JPEGs. Like, what are you doing out there? But the concept of DIDs is important, I think, going into the future, where one of the applications could be that the government gives veterans an NFT using the DID as verification of ownership and who they are, profile. And then they could send, like, let's say, a disability NFT to their DID. So then Vital could go, or somebody else could go to another organization asking for help with resources, and they just say, what's your Chia wallet? What's your DID? Let me look you up. And all they have to do is go, this DID did indeed receive a disability NFT from the government. And we can verify this using DIDs. This is a DID for the government. This is your personal DID. Yeah, you qualify and you will start receiving benefits or whatever immediately. So those are the long-term, 3, 5, maybe 10 years out things that I think could be applied in kind of to real world stuff that may not exist yet. So there's a lot there, but yeah.
Very exciting. I want to zoom out a bit and kind of look forward in the next 10 years. What do you guys think the tech sphere will look like a decade from now? So it's 2032. Curious what you guys think. I think you're on mute, Vital.
Sorry about that. In 10 years, we'll have flying cars, man. For sure. No, I think that tech, is definitely an interesting field at an interesting time. I think we've seen a lot of software and hardware, just a lot of software mainly just put together by a very homogeneous group of people in the tech world, And that's changing in 2022. So I think that we're not quite equipped to see what tech in 2032 is going to look like. It's going to be very different. I'm an optimist. I'm a dreamer, so I have big hopes. But I think, hopefully we'll have figured out how to make it a lot less harsh on the environment. That's one thing that's kind of harshing it for me on the blockchain stuff right now. It's just a waste of energy. There's so many potential uses, but it's like once you kind of look into what it takes to run Bitcoins and Ethereum transactions, it's kind of less cool quickly, So yeah, what do you guys think about the future?
Oh, you're on mute too. Go.
I think much the same. I mean, there's just so many factors happening right now between laws catching up to tech and just I don't know. I don't know what it looks like in 10 years. I think it could go many different ways. I wonder what blockchain technology looks like in 10 years, where it went, but I'm not sure really.
Yeah, I mean, obviously a hard one to answer. We don't really see the future. I think I see things like we're still going to have websites. We're still going to have computers. It's all going to be sort of similar as it is now. If we're looking at the past, I think 10 years is actually a pretty significant amount of time for technology to change. I think introduction of things like an iPhone and Android phones did change things for people and accessibility to resources even. You don't have to be sitting in a library. If you don't have a personal computer at home, you don't have to go to the library. You could actually afford a smartphone and cell service and do a lot of the stuff that you used to have a dedicated line to access. Starlink, I think, might actually allow a lot of countries in the world that don't have good dedicated internet would potentially get access. And what Vital said, because of the introduction of more people to the internet, there's going to be some extremely brilliant people who are like 15 years old who are going to be solving problems that we're going to go, why didn't they do this before? And the answer might be as simple as the internet was not accessible to them. Like they might still be figuring out how to solve the hunger and water problem, but they figured out how to like harvest water from air for their region of the world without knowing much except for internet. And they figured out how to access certain parts of the internet that allowed them to learn that, right? Like I'm a futurist, so I love thinking about the future. I just don't think there's going to be super crazy changes, but I do think there's going to be accessibility for more people in the world to the internet, which means more diverse people who are going to be entering the field, solving problems. I think the stigma of learning stuff online is going to continue to disappear. And I think there's going to be some big challenges to traditional education, and going to school may not be a standard way of doing things anymore. Like homeschooling, it may look better and better as an option, and that homeschooling might just be a bunch of kids in front of, like we are doing, and the teachers may not be traditional teachers. There could be like more like influencers today, right? Like there are influencers today who, there's some negative connotations, I think, to influencers on social media, but there are others who are genuinely wanting to teach people. And it's possible you just take the path that is the most interesting to you in life, and you like throw away all this, as we call boilerplate and code. You just throw away all that stuff that you may not need. And you just, at 15 years old, you're creating your own company, and it does what you've always wanted it to do. Like, that's cool. That would be cool. So I see some of those things, but who knows? We'll see. Let's get to that age first.
Yeah. Very exciting stuff here. As we wrap up here, one final question I have for all three of you is: what's one piece of advice you'd give to someone starting out in your particular career field? Combe, I'll start with you here.
Yeah, I think I have some. I'm very early on in my career still, but I think I have some advice for the very beginning. It's put yourself out there. Like, I'm guilty of not doing that enough, but you have to find people that are interested in the same things, and and the internet is perfect for that, and so probably exposing yourself and finding other people interested in what you want to do is my biggest advice. Oh, and one more, it's don't worry so much about how good you are. It's more like don't give up and keep learning, because you'll get there.
Noted. Vital, what about you?
Definitely try to look at different viewpoints. It's all too easy to go to somebody who agrees with you and be like, yeah, both of us are right. You get a third person who agrees with you. It's like, oh my God, all three of us are geniuses, and it's like, it's almost like I've developed a spider sense that when too many of that happens, it's just like, I'm in the wrong. I don't know how, I don't know who, I don't know what, but I'm recognizing this pattern, And so, especially, building tech digital products with multidisciplinary teams. You've got front end, back end, data scientists, the marketing person who's not looking at any of that, but somehow they also need to know all of it, And it's like, how does that all mesh? It's like there's a lot of context switching, and so it's like you really need to understand everybody's viewpoint, and it's like user experience is like, whether or not you're good at communication, you're gonna get good at communication. So yeah, that's the one bit of advice I have.
Very cool.
Yeah, absolutely. That 100% agree with that. And to add to that, when you're ready to get started, just dive into it. Don't wait for anybody's approval. Just do it. Get started today. Write that app, write that website. Don't worry about the name not being perfect. Don't worry about your LLC name not being perfect. Don't worry about the UI not being perfect. Get started. Get it done. Get the most simplest thing you can imagine done, and learn from there. Iterate, and continue to learn, because the best way to succeed, I think, in the tech career is really learning. Probably any career is just be always a student. Continue being a student forever, for the rest of your life.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you guys so much. I feel like we could have done this for several hours. But yeah, thank you guys so much. I appreciate you guys taking the time out of your day to chat with me, and appreciate again, checking out the hackathon, and congratulations again for winning first place. I hope to see you guys in our future events. We're always trying to make them exciting and fresh, and thank you guys again.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you. It was a
lovely
pleasure
to be here. It was a great time, and definitely, we want to do a hackathon in the metaverse. Hit up Jamil.
Yeah, absolutely.